You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, so Jeff, just do the best you can. People like you, and you're going to make a difference today.
Yeah,
if
right.
you just, oh, hi. How you doing?
You've never had to do that in your life.
Yeah, I was just getting ready for this episode. I didn't want to, don't want to fail today.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So,
thank you for the
Just
concern.
psyching myself up. This is
so important
my
to you.
pre-show routine.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, so today we're going to start with, like taboo, you're going to give Jeff clues so you can try to guess the bold word. It's the word in bold.
Okay, I can do
However,
it.
you're not allowed to say any of the italicized words as your clues.
Yes, just like taboo.
So we were going to put for those who are watching, we're going to put the italicized words on the screen for the, just so that people can see the words that I'm not allowed to say. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of words you're not allowed to say, but in this game, there's specific words you're not allowed to say.
Yeah.
Here.
I think everybody knows how to play taboo.
Yeah. Okay.
Except for somebody watching in another country.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yes.
All right. Here we go. Agape means
Love.
boom, baby.
There you go.
I wasn't allowed to say marriage, affection, adore, or I, or you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I took a whole new route for that one.
There you go. We got it.
That was easy.
Oh, we just talked about that.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to the chapel to attend a
Wedding.
wedding.
There
Oh
you go.
my goodness, I
Wow.
am slaying
We're
it.
nailing it.
I wasn't allowed to say bride, groom, married, vows, or rings.
Okay.
All right.
Going to the chapel and...
Okay. Oh, dude, how about this one? Ready?
Okay, here we go.
Post-wedding, I attend a...
Party.
What's that?
Reception.
Yes.
Really?
That's it. Yes. I wasn't allowed to say party, celebration, after, which is why I said post.
Oh, right. Post.
Dinner or dance.
There you go. Post. Very good.
Okay. And then, okay. How about this one?
Ooh.
When, at the beginning of a wedding, when people enter, the fancy word for that is called the...
Processional.
Dude.
You almost said that one.
What do you mean?
You said the...
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to say music, walk, bride, ceremony, or order.
Okay. Very good.
See, the problem with Desiree trying to trick us with this is that she doesn't realize we're professional wedding people.
That's right.
Right?
I've only done 10 million of these.
Yes, right. Okay.
Okay.
How about this one? Ready?
Okay. Yes.
The people attending the reception are on a sheet of paper, and that paper is called the...
Oh, my goodness. The guest list?
Yes. That's it. I wasn't allowed to say friends, family, tables, seating, or invited.
Okay. There you go.
So,
Guest list.
dude, I nailed it.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of me.
There you go. Good job.
Like the Pharisee yesterday.
Yeah.
In our podcast.
So proud of me. I'm so glad I'm not terrible like other people who play games.
That's exactly what our
That's right.
podcast was yesterday.
Yep, that's right.
So if you missed it, go online and watch it.
That's right. It's fantastic.
Go binge it.
So I did a wedding one time. So I used to, I'm a musician too. So I did a lot of weddings, playing processionals and whatever.
I sang at like 40 weddings before I ever did a wedding.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was in a brass group one time, and I was the lead trumpet of this little brass quintet, I think. We were supposed to play Pachelbel's Canon as the bride walks down. So, my part, right? That part of it. So when I get to that fanfare part, because if I start wom, 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 all that. So it layers. So it starts off slower and slower, and then it layers, and then finally there's the high, and as soon as I hit that is when she's supposed to come down.
Yeah.
Well, she got cold feet. She wouldn't come down the aisle.
That's hilarious.
So then answer it. See who it is.
It's KB.
Answer it. Let's see.
I already. I could have done it.
That would have been awesome.
I already shut it off.
So, anyways, she wouldn't come down the aisle. So then, the guy that was leading, he was sitting next to me. He bumps me, and so we have to go back to it. And then we probably went through that like 4 or 5 times, and finally, her father starts walking down the aisle and just holding her hand, pulling her down the aisle.
Oh no! Was she betrothed?
Yeah.
He's pulling her to the altar.
Once they got to like the middle, then they started. Then she was okay. She was in. She locks eyes with the groom, And she finally comes all the way down the thing. But
when my wife
she was afraid of the crowd, not getting married.
Right.
She saw all those people and everybody turned to look at her.
Yeah.
And she panicked and wouldn't go. Yeah.
My wife actually missed her cue and waited about 5 seconds to come around the corner. Uh-huh. And so when the music hit, she was supposed to come around the corner. She was on these steps, and come to find out, she was delayed. And for about a millisecond, I was like, "What's wrong? Did she abandon me?"
Right, yeah.
But come to find out later on, it was the father of the bride, right? My father-in-law, who paused because he just always does his own thing, right? Sure. Always. And he always goes, and he stopped her and he goes, "Hey, just let you know, if you don't want to do this, we can call it off. It's not too late." Not that he didn't like me, but he's just taking care of his girl, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, but for about a millisecond, I was like, "What's wrong?" So
there you go.
Anyway,
when you saw her, did you get teared up?
Oh yeah.
Did you cry?
Yeah. So I have 4 brothers, and my brother. Sorry, I know we're running on time. I have 4 older brothers, and they all were married except for me and Tommy, who's the middle one. So Tommy was making a joke. He had been dating Susan for like 10 years, right, and not married. So he kept on saying, "Hey, after tomorrow, I'll be the winner."
Oh, right.
Uh-huh. And then Susan said, "Oh yeah, I'm the winner's girlfriend," and everybody's laughing, right?
Right.
So actually, when Liz came around the corner, I got all my brothers standing next to me, and I leaned over to Tommy and I said, "Hey, Tommy," I said, "I'm the winner."
Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are reading in Matthew chapter 19 and in Mark chapter 10. Hey, we're back in the parallels.
That's right.
Right. So the parallel, if you're just joining us on the podcast, we're going through the 250 events of Jesus' life in order. That's chronological order. The Gospels aren't written that way entirely. And then we're also doing it in parallel. There's 4 Gospels that tell the story of Jesus. And sometimes 2 writers or 3 writers write the same story.
Right.
And so we're reading them from all the different sources and then looking for what are the interesting elements that stand out in each one. So
because each author, most of the time, there'll be different details.
Yeah. Well, they had different reasons for writing. Right. And they had a different audience that they were targeting. So they wrote different things. And so it's really interesting to do this way. So Matthew chapter 19, verse 3, it says, "Some Pharisees came and tried to trap him with this question. Should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for just any reason? Haven't you read the Scriptures?" Jesus replied. "They record from the beginning, God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the 2 are united into one. Since they are no longer 2 but 1, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Then why did Moses say in the law that a man could give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away?" They asked her. Jesus replied, "Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts, but is not what God had originally intended. And I tell you this, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery unless his wife has been unfaithful." And Jesus' disciples then said to him, "If this is the case, it's better not to marry." "Not everyone can accept this statement," Jesus said, "only those whom God helps. Some are born as eunuchs, some have been made eunuchs by others, and some choose not to marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can." And then in Mark chapter 10, verse 2, it says, "Some Pharisees came and tried to trap him with this question, should a man be allowed to divorce his wife? Jesus answered them with the question, what did Moses say in the law about divorce? Well, he permitted it, they replied. He said a man can give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away. But Jesus responded, he wrote this commandment only as a concession to your hard hearts. But God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the 2 are united into one. Since they are no longer 2 but 1, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Later, when he was alone with his disciples in the house, they brought up the subject again, and he told them, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery against her, and if a woman divorces her husband and marries someone else, she commits adultery. And he just leaves it at that.
There it is.
Wow.
So we're talking about divorce today.
Yeah. We're talking about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Jesus said that God made them male and female from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So there's that whole issue in society.
Right. Oh, in society. Yeah. That's sort of like hidden in there, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a statement that you could definitely use to talk about that. So do we want to talk about that?
Sure. The Bible says that God made male and female from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 options.
Hey, ready? The end.
The end.
Yeah, that's funny.
So there's that part of it. And then he is highlighting, they're coming to Jesus, trying to trap him. Remember, through this whole thing, they're trying to trip him up. So on this one, they bring a legal issue because they view marriage purely as a legal thing. And Jesus keeps pivoting everything away from law and back to the heart, always. So Jesus is always taking it back to the heart and to God's original intent. So God's original intent was never law. God's original intent was what's best for humanity. That's all. And you'll really live the life you were meant to live if you choose to go God's way. And they wanted to distill it just down to the legalities of things and make this less about the heart and more about just a contract that you can break or change or, sever. And so they're trying to get Jesus to make a mistake. Because if he agrees with them that it's okay to get divorced, well, then he's agreeing, and they feel like what they did is they pulled a lot of the power back on their side of this debate between Jesus and the Pharisees. If he disagrees with them, he's going to make a lot of people mad, including Herod, who had just killed his cousin, right, John the Baptist, because he was preaching against divorce. Right. And so maybe they could get Jesus to make Herod mad too, and they could get Herod to kill Jesus like Herod killed John the Baptist. So there's lots of motivations for bringing this issue up, and Jesus just threads the needle again, as he always does.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I remember hearing I'm interested to hear what you think about this, about divorce. So I heard heard a message by a famous preacher a long time ago, and probably about 25 years ago. And he said, I want to go on a limb, and I want to say that before I lay out what I'm about to say, he said, I want you to know that not a lot of people believe the way that I believe about marriage and divorce of what I'm about to tell you. And so he said, if you take all the scriptures that talk about divorce and remarriage, and you take them all together, right? He said, it's really interesting because in one of the Gospels, Jesus would say, because he teaches about marriage and divorce in a couple different times. This isn't the only time that he teaches about it,
That's correct.
So these are the two that are parallel about the time that he teaches right before he heads into Jerusalem. But he talks about it in other places as well. And he says that in one of the Gospels, it says, oh, you have the right to divorce if there's adultery. He says, but in another part of one of the Gospels, it says that if you get divorced, you just commit adultery, or you commit adultery if you marry somebody else, period. And it doesn't give the loophole. Yeah. It doesn't give the loophole of if your wife or husband has been unfaithful.
These two passages, Matthew 19 and Mark 10, 19 says, unless the wife has been unfaithful, one of the spouses, the other one doesn't.
Right.
So even here, there's that difference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So one gives the loophole, and the other one doesn't.
That's right.
Right. And he says, and then he brought up another portion of the scripture because he was looking at all of them. And in other parts of the gospel, it says, they ask him a question. They say, Jesus, is it okay for somebody to get divorced? And Jesus' response to that question was simply this. He didn't even answer the question. He just said, when someone becomes one, they can never become unone.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So he says, okay. He goes, and let's take every single scripture together and let's piece it together theologically and understand how God views marriage and divorce. And so his position, which by the way, I've always thought that this is the only explanation that I have ever heard that made any sense. Because one has a loophole, the other one doesn't have a loophole. One says it's committing adultery. The other one says, unless it's this, all these kind of things. And he says, why would Jesus answer a question and say about divorce and say, once a person gets, to become one, they can never, ever become unone. And he says, here's what I believe. Because marriage was created in perfection in the garden, right? So think about it. So we are a part of an institution called marriage that was created in absolute perfection without sin. And so God's intention for marriage in perfection was that once you became one with a person, you could never, ever become unone. So his contention was even today, right now, even if your spouse were to become, was unfaithful, you would go ahead and be allowed to divorce her and remarry somebody. But in Jesus' eyes, he never gives the loophole for marriage or for remarriage. So think about every scripture that he talks about for remarriage. Every scripture that he says about remarrying somebody, he says, if you remarry somebody while your spouse is still alive, you commit adultery. And he doesn't give a loophole.
Unless his wife has been unfaithful.
And that one.
This one.
Right?
Yeah.
But yet in other ones, he just says, you just commit adultery if they're still alive.
Sure.
Right. So his, again, I'm not saying that this person is right. I'm just saying he says in God's eyes, theologically, he's allowing you to get divorced. And yes, people do get remarried, but in God's eyes, you will never not be married to that person regardless.
Oh, well, because you made a vow.
Right. And, and that's what he's saying. He's saying like, yes, it's going to be sin. Yeah. So his contention was any remarriage while that person is alive, anyone, for any reason whatsoever, is sin, period. It's adultery. But he says there's grace on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. So I think that's just ignoring the fact that there are multiple times when he says, unless the other spouse has been unfaithful, that person's free. Right. But he's distinguishing what man has allowed because of hardened hearts. Right. So Jesus says, I tell you.
Yeah.
I tell you this, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery unless his wife has been unfaithful. That's Jesus. That's not the law.
That's not Moses.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. So Jesus is giving that same, Jesus is the one that's extending that exception. So what we have to remember is, so they're coming to Jesus.
I received that.
Yeah. So they're coming to Jesus and trying to just make this purely legal. And he goes, okay, if you just want the law, God allowed Moses to give a process for divorce because humans have hard hearts. There's a point where sometimes you get to a point of no return, right? Mm-hmm. And so the law gives ways for people to end a marriage. Now, in that context, in that day, this really was a civil rights kind of an issue because it was very easy in the days of Moses and in the time of the Old Testament for a man to throw a woman out.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't because the woman was property.
Yeah, for any reason. That's so terrible.
And so in that case, and so that's why Jesus is talking. He's not endorsing that idea of a man can divorce his wife, but he doesn't. What he's saying is Moses gave this law that says, no, you have to give a written bill of divorcement. There's a legal document now, because what would happen is guys would kick the woman out and there's no provision. There's no Social Security. She can't just go get another job, right? So if she's going to pay, oftentimes it would be, a life of prostitution or something. If she's going to ever have any money, any kind of way to take care of herself, it'd be a horrible thing. Or sometimes guys would kick him out. Some other guy would come around and be willing to marry her, and then he'd put his claim back out. Not because he wanted her at home, because he didn't want her to have anybody else, right? And didn't want her to have any life. He wanted her life to be ruined. And so what this bill of divorcement did was it gave a complete and total release. He couldn't come back and continue to ruin her life. This is it's a civil rights issue that Moses made sure was in place there, that God had Moses put there to protect a woman who is divorced. That's where that came from. And divorce comes from the hardness of our hearts, one or the other or both, right? And Jesus is acknowledging that is in the broken world that we live in, that's a thing. But then he's saying, just casual divorce for convenience or because I don't want to do the hard work of fixing this marriage or whatever, that kind of thing, you're right, you're one. And God says, because you're one, you can't become unone, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that case, then when you do, what you're doing is you're cheating on your own vows. That's what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the adultery side of it. Now, the person who already committed adultery has set free the person who didn't commit adultery in this case. That's what Jesus is trying to say. And I think that what you have to do is take all of the words, like you were saying earlier, all the words of divorce, and allow all of those words in the Bible to all apply.
Right.
Right? And so it's not that we can just pick and choose and go, well, this is what he meant. God meant for marriage to last forever.
Right. Which is really clear.
Yeah. And so I would say that there's blessing in doing the hard work of keeping it together.
Now, let me ask you this question, this hard question. Is there ever a case where you would ever recommend a divorce?
I never have. Yeah, there's been times where I've recommended people escape, people, get to a safe place. We've recommended safe houses and things like that be able to get away from an abusive thing. But I think that's an individual decision of what's best for that person. And, yes, I've recommended, no, I've never recommended divorce. Yes, I've recommended many, many times. Let's get away. Let's get safe. Right. Through physical abuse, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then once that's happened, now they have to work through the legal sides of things. Right. It's illegal because they're physically separated. Now they have to work through the legal side. I'm not a legal expert on that. So, I would always hope and pray for some kind of miracle, a restoration, that kind of thing. But, yeah,
it's a tough deal too, isn't it? So, there's so many interactions and conversations that we have with people all the time about, being happy and, being miserable and getting married too young, and we were just kids and we didn't know what we were doing, and boy, we made a mistake, and we went to Vegas. All
but there's life after divorce, right? There's forgiveness for every imperfection, for every sin that we commit. There's forgiveness for those things. This isn't a fatal, a mortal sin kind of a thing. Right. All of these things are forgiven and forgivable.
And that was the posture of the end of that sermon I was telling you about. Right. Yeah. Where there's grace on both sides of the equation.
Right. Yeah. It's not perfect, and you're free to make your choices, but you're not free to choose the consequences. The consequences are there's the huge majority of poverty in America is because of single parent homes. The huge majority of criminals in America come from single parent homes, right? There's all these things. A lot of the depression and struggle among teenagers and gender identity issues often come from single parent homes. Not always, but a lot of times the numbers are just astronomical. So there are consequences, but that doesn't mean that we can't find a way through, right? I know my mom was a single parent, right, for a long time, and as she began to raise me to follow Jesus, things changed. God changed her life. God changed our life. We can go in a different direction. You can break that cycle, but the math is it's really, really bad on everybody involved, right? Everybody gets poorer in a divorce. Everybody struggles in relationships. Everybody gets cynical and fearful of long-term commitments. Divorced families usually have lots of divorced kids. It just goes on and on and on, right? So we want to push back, and we want to do the hard work, and we want to lean in, trust God's grace in the difficulty, and find a way to make it work, and all those things. But our hard hearts allowed or made God, or didn't make God, but God made a law that would, make a way out of those dangerous and bad situations. And so we just have to rely on God's grace through it, and then lean into Him after, and look for miracles that God would rescue us from what the normal results are. Right? Yeah, that's really it.
So all my brothers are divorced except for one. A lot of my uncles went through divorce. My mom and dad got divorced, right? I mean, it's like there's so much divorce, in my family. My brother Jimmy he's on his third marriage, and so it's one of those things where I seem to be around it my whole life. And by the way, just a side note for anybody on this podcast who actually knows me personally, I want to tell you that so my mom and dad got divorced when I was 10. My dad married my mom's best friend, and then for about 10 years, we were taught to hate her, right, and do really bad things like vandalize her house and her property and things. Right. And then all of a sudden, my mom decides to forgive, and then they become best friends again, and now they vacation together, they did COVID together, they did all these different things, and they were just all three hanging out. Well, then eventually she passes away, and then now they're in their 80s, right? I mean, she literally just died like a year and a half ago. Right. So my dad has pretty much nobody left. My mom has been single since their divorce for the last 35 years, or whatever it's been. So now they're together every day. They're hanging out. They're not going to get remarried, but it seems like they might as well have. They might as well, right? And now the brand new thing that's happening is they're going to church every Sunday. Wow. So now they introduce themselves as Al Zarba and Jean Zarba because she never changed her name. Oh, wow. Right. And so then, and so they're like, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Zarba. Then they have to go, oh, no, we're not married. But they're these two cute little 80-year-olds, right? Yeah. Who are now going to church, walking into church.
As long as you're breathing breath, there's still hope.
That's right. That's right.
That's what grace can do. So if you find yourself in a divorce situation, just understand God's grace is there for you. Right. And, lean into Him. That's right. Lean in and decide that you're going to, because Jesus talks about the whole idea of celibacy is that eunuch conversation he has at the very end, right? And so some, they choose not to marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, saying, okay, in my unmarried state, I'm going to really lean into being able to serve God in a way I couldn't do if I was married, right? And so that seems to be Jesus' solution to the unmarried, is really go after the things of God in your singleness. And so I'm not saying that it's a blessing, but it may be a necessary evil in your life. But now use this as an opportunity to really go after God's kingdom and make a difference with your life. Remember when Jesus taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven?
Yeah.
Just give your life to that, and it give you a cause and purpose.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's our time, and we will see you next time on The Bible Guys.